what happened to extra remix and extra design? I hear all these songs because of you now.
Right. Yeah, so he's asking what happened to Extra Remix and Design Club. Basically, they still happen, just whenever I have time to work on them. Like Extra Remix is one that I enjoy doing, but it takes a lot of my time to do because it's basically me doing it solo. I write it, I voice it, I do all the editing, and I like doing it a lot. And I have like a list of a dozen like artists that I want to get to for Extra Remix. Yeah, some of them are here. One of them is playing in 30 minutes. Yeah, and some of them I got to meet here for the first time. Some of them I met here at Magfest in previous years. It's been awesome. I met I don't know if he's in here now, but I met the guy who wrote our intro theme this weekend for the first time.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
He's super cool. Yeah, no, I definitely want to continue that. And Design Club is also still continuing. Like the most recent one was the Punch-Out one, the animation, which yeah, again, one that I wrote myself because I'm the animator on the team.
And that's really been the problem with Design Club, right? We've experimented with trying other designers, and we haven't really settled on somebody who. My life's been super hectic. I've had too much to do. Any of you guys watch James Recommend know I do it in 5 minutes at 3 a.m. whenever I can find the time, right? And so just finding someone to do Design Club, it's something that I would like to do periodically and jump in on. We just haven't really found the right writer for Design Club regularly either, or the right mix of people to periodically do a new one.
Yeah, and since we've obviously had to slide back on that, on making those weekly or bi-weekly type shows, I think we instead want to just focus on making them really polished and really like high production and as good and as long as they need to be. Like the Punch-Out one is a good bit longer than a lot of our earlier ones, and I've put a lot more time and effort into the editing and work on it. I just want to make them all nice and polished now if we're not going to be coming out with them all the time.
Oh, but I do know exactly the one I want to do next. How many of you guys have played Baldur's Gate? Like the first Baldur's Gate? All right. So if you remember Baldur's Gate well, do you guys remember Durlag's Tower?
Yes!
Durlag's Tower is one of the best dungeons I have ever seen designed in a game. There's so much that's right about how they design it. And even where they're wrong, their experimentation is really interesting. So I want to do a deep deconstruction, like a multiple episode deconstruction of just Durlag's Tower. We'll see when I get that time.
I'm going to probably enlist all of you for footage capture on that one. So, okay, let's have another question here. Let's see, you the Gator in the front.
Awesome. This actually ties into Design Club because I really love the Punch-Out episode in particular. Are we going to get any more on animation games, and what games recently have had really nice character animation in-game that relays as much information as the Punch-Out games did? And as an addition, as a indie animator for games, how should I approach that kind of animation design in the tight constraints that I have making an indie game?
Right on. So yeah, there will probably be more Design Club animation themed type episodes in the future. Basically, as soon as I see a game that gets me like pumped enough to like, okay, I have to make an episode about this. Because Punch-Out for the Wii I had not even seen or played until like 8 months ago. And then I was just furious that nobody had told me about this game. That was so cool, because just the more I looked at it, the more impressed I was by it. But yeah, I would love to make some more animation-themed ones in the future if I see a game that excites me enough, or I think about an animation issue that games have that I want to approach enough. As for like working as an indie animator in games yourself, do you work in like 2D sprite or 3D? What do you do?
2D sprites.
Okay, so I've not done a lot of 2D sprite stuff myself, and with, I guess depending on the resolution, you're super limited in terms of expressiveness. I imagine you have to like work pretty broad to like communicate emotion and
yeah, well, I don't work in pixel really. I work in more crisper, cleaner styles.
Nice. Okay. In that case, like, what sort of games do you work on? Like,
I did a game jam. I've been doing game jams a lot, and in those I mostly do 2D platformers. So a lot of jumping sprites, dying sprites, running sprites.
Right. Lots of just game action.
Yeah, a lot of
stuff,
basic game action.
Okay, so, and especially with games, making the shift from film for me has been a bit of a learning experience as well, because there you have all the time in the world to come, like, just, it's only about performance and that's all. It's not about like add the action that the characters have to do. But instead, I've found that you have to focus a lot more on putting the character into every single action you can, just in the timing of the jumps, in the way they run, whether it's a really bouncy one, or trying to put character, like as much, like, you know, those character walk cycles and exercises that students have to do all the time, where they have to try to like do just a walk that feels like someone interesting and unique, like basically doing that, trying to find the character in the way they move and interact around the space. Like the way Rayman characters move around, like, is super cartoony and bouncy and fun and like this really nice and appeal and smooth, and like I think they've totally found a character that not only that the characters have, but that the game has in that animation style, that just that kind of appeal. So I think that's definitely a thing to shoot for.
And don't worry about taking stuff to 11, right? Like, whether it be Metal Slug or what happens to Mario when he dies, right? These really expressive, big, ridiculous moments, depending on the game, but for a lot of games, what seems a little bit too big for you in the action, in the moment for the player, is actually going to read really well.
Yeah, generally it seems like going broader is better than going subtler for the most part, especially in the game action stuff.
Are you familiar with the video called Juice It Up?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, it's two indie developers, one of the Scandinavian countries. Sorry, anyone from Scandinavia. And they did a talk. They took Pong and then said, how can we make this awesome without actually changing the game at all? And it's just animation and making it bigger, like you said. And I would recommend it if you're interested in using small visual details to convey expression.
I'm watching that later. Juice it up. Okay. All right, let's have another question. Here on this side, some sort of gray box. That's the thing, yeah. How do you get into video game writing?
All right. So this is actually really good, because so the question is, how do you get into video game writing? And I'm going to give the depressing answer, and then do you want to give the less depressing answer?
Sorry, do you mean writing for games or about games? For games.
Do you want to give a less depressing answer than what I'm about to give?
All right, you go first, and I'll do better.
All right, so I like this. I can work with this. So, all right, the problem is that we are writing for games. If you're talking about big AAA games, is something that there aren't often junior writer positions, right? A lot of times we take our designers and make them do a lot of that copywriting. A lot of times they hire people from outside the industry, people who have experience in comics or film or television. And there are not as many just writer positions in games. It's more now than it used to be. Be prepared for the fact that, especially a lot of your early writing positions, will be writing things like item descriptions, right? We'll be writing a lot of just instructional text and copy text, and not be writing world or story at all. So no, there's a long way. On the other hand, there are a lot of paths now to get into writing for things outside of the AAA space. And a lot of people I know have begun writing in often volunteer work, but for small indie companies, this sort of thing. And once they get a title or two under their belt, have started just calling themselves a writer and calling themselves a contractor and cold calling everybody, right? Start sending cards out to everybody, sending resumes out to everybody, and all you need is one or two people to pick you up, and you're set. But it's not as straightforward as here's a linear path inside the industry that takes you to the title junior writer.
Yeah, it's actually really, really messy. And it's messy for everyone. I mean, even, it's not like artists have thank God we have an established place in the video games industry. It's all straightforward from there, right? So, I mean, it's already messy. It's just messier than other things. This is one that as soon as you begin to parse it apart, like each of the pieces that you've picked apart then goes down into smaller and smaller sub pieces. So I'll try to stay like as big picture as I can. But a really important question is, why do you want to be a writer? And this is probably important for any craft, but I think for writing it's very specifically important because there are not that many currently available options. So if what you want is to write for the kind of thing that already exists, you need to be like dead on certain about that. Because what's not going to work is that you want to write really expressive and interesting stories, and so you try to go work at a big company because you're doing less than no progress toward what you want to be doing. You're actually wasting time that you could be spending doing what you actually want to do, right? Because but maybe you do want to go work at that big company, right? And like James says, as soon as you do that, then there's process, right? Then there's not just the fact that I'm writing a story. There is politics, right? Then there's the structure of how you advance, and not just in the industry, but in this particular company that I'm trying to go to, right? And just raw persistence has a lot to do with it because you don't know how most of those companies work, right? Because you haven't worked at them yet. There's nothing like persistence. Persistence and honing in as much as you can on what do you want. And when you realize that you've been pursuing something you don't want, getting out. That's a trap, is you can end up trying to do something that you eventually start to get this nagging feeling and you're like, something about this isn't right. But if you don't follow that feeling, again, you do less than no progress because you're wasting time. And I mean, it's also easy for me to get up here and say this because like I forewent all of that and I just made my own thing, right? And sometimes that works. Or rather, to heck with works, sometimes it becomes like known and successful. If it's what you wanted to make, then it always works, right? And one way to guarantee that it works on that level is to make your own thing. But again, you're dealing with what do you really want? And if what you want is to be part of a system and a structure that makes sense, and writing your own thing often doesn't make sense, or often you don't have the resources to be able to do that, I don't know, there's nothing like persistence and just brute forcing it until you figure out what you want.
And I just wanted to add, by the way, read and live. There are too many writers who I've met in this industry, or people who have ended up having to do writing for games, who their whole life is video games and the video game industry, and they don't have a perspective beyond it. And this is why we get so many stories about orcs and elves, right? And they're more likely to read Star Wars fanfic, or and not that there's anything wrong with it, right? Or hack fantasy than they are to go back and look at some of the timeless works that have stuck with us for a reason, right? Go dig into all that. Go dig into all the things that have resonated with humanity over centuries, and then go and have your life, have other experiences, get beyond the walls that games right now put around us, and bring that into your writing. Bring that in, because that will allow you to bring something new and different and personal. And if you do not have that new and different and personal thing, there is no space, right? Because you already have those guys who can write your generic orcs and elves story.
All right, let's see if we can get a few more questions in. Good answers, by the way. Let's see, the umbrella.
Hey, nice. So my name is Eric Nolan. I'm a student, computer science major studying game development, but I want to use game development to help people. I sort of know that I love games and I want to help people, so I'm trying to figure out how to put these two together. So sort of a two-part question. First, do you have advice for developers who want to make games that tackle social issues, maybe issues about race or gender or things like that? And then second, do you think there's anything we could learn about from the gaming community, or like the best practices of game development to help society? So maybe like the answer for video games helping society isn't to make games that help society, but there's like something that we can learn from games that we can apply to different ways to help people.
So I've got a couple of things.
Should we repeat the question?
All right, yeah, good call. So we have a fellow who's a computer science student who wants to make games, that help society. And so the question was sort of, how do I do that? What should I learn from this industry? But also, what can the world learn from this industry that may not be games themselves? And it may surprise a lot of you guys to know, but if you go back, watch the episode on engagement curve or interest curve, and then go watch the extra history episodes. All the the first extra history episodes were actually just an intellectual experiment on my part on whether or not I could apply interest curve to teaching history. And it seems to resonate with a fair number of people, right? There's all these psychological things that we have learned from spending billions and billions of dollars trying to figure out how to engage a human being that we can immediately bring in and start applying to other aspects of our life. And read things like Jesse Schell's Book of Lenses has a lot of really good broad pieces that we can bring in and apply to anything. As far as making more socially impactful games, right now my honest suggestion to you is work with smaller companies or indie companies because they're more willing to take the risk on addressing these things. I don't think addressing these things is actually the risk the big AAA companies think it is. In fact, I think we need to expand our audience in order to support the budgets that AAA games now demand. But you're going to get a lot more progress a lot faster working for the independent team. Start making some stuff now. There's no reason while you're in college, grab some people, get it out there, get people looking at it, make sure that your message is actually getting across, and just show it to people. If there's people who you respect in the independent games community or the games community at large, try sending them a tweet, right? Just try saying, hey, would you mind checking out my thing? Because we're not as unapproachable as it may seem from the outside. Well, there you go. Like that was an excellent example. Have you seen Never Alone?
I have, yes.
There was an example of people totally outside the games industry commissioning something to, and there are points of success and points of failure in there, right? But just even taking that first step to try and show it, got lots of people talking about a subject that they would never have otherwise been talking about for all the game's merits and for all the game's flaws, right? But do you have any thoughts?
Well, just very, very quickly, I think it's important to note when talking about these things that you should really love making this thing, right? I mean, like, obviously we all want, you know, social progress, and when we want to pursue equal opportunity and rights and the ability to live for everyone. But if that isn't a subject that you're passionate about, or if you're pursuing a subject inside of that you're not passionate about, you literally may not have the energy to pursue it to the length where it will make an impact for someone, right? And I think this is important, you know, like, I think it's important to consider, like, well, what do you want to do, right? Like, do you really care about this? And I'm not implying that anyone making these things doesn't care about them, but I think it's just important to reiterate, because when you do care about it, you'll go to the ends of the earth to make sure that that change actually happens.
All right, now we are going to, in a few minutes, walk over to the forums room, which is open, where they say that we can keep doing this as long as we want to. Anybody who wants to come in who has a question that we haven't answered, we're going to stay in there until you guys literally have nothing left to ask and you've all left. So,
truth be told, by the way, I think when we've done this in the past, it gets way cooler when we move to the forum room, because there isn't this us sitting at a table, you guys sitting, because what is that, right? Like, our medium's interactive, so too should all these things be. Let's just go sit in the circle and have a discussion, right? Let's just, like, talk.
yes. Yeah, that'll be fun. So, with that said, thank you guys very much for coming to the Extra Credits panel, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of Magfest. So.